Welcome to Heresy, the Horus Heresy talk show. In this video, we're going to be talking about the Word Bearers. We're going to be talking about their faction rules and their armoury, and this will be part one of a multi-part series looking at what the Word Bearers can bring to the table in Horus Heresy, the Age of Darkness. We're going to be talking about the faction trait and the advanced reaction. We're going to be talking about their Warlord traits, and we're also going to be going through all of their armoury options in detail. But before we do that, if you enjoy the channel and enjoy the content, please do leave me a like and a subscribe. And if there's anything in the video at all that you'd like to discuss or anything you'd like to give me feedback on, please do leave me a comment down below. And with that, on with the show. So first of all, let's talk about the Word Bearers faction trait. It's called True Believers. And what this means is that their leadership can't be reduced below 6. Now, this is generally maligned as being the worst Legion trait in the game, and, I have to say, I probably agree that it is the worst Legion trait in the game, but that said, it's not quite as bad as it's being made out to be. Now, when you lose a combat via morale, you're often going to be below 6, so this is like a leadership bonus, which is pretty cool in a lot of ways. The problem with it is it's 6, and, the average result on 2 dice is a 7, so even when it can't go below 6, you're probably still going to fail that roll on averages. And I do think this probably could have been a 7 and it would have been it would probably still been the worst Legion trait, but it probably would have been a little bit more decent. This won't come into play a lot for other things. So if someone's shooting your Space Marine unit that's lost its sergeant, so its leadership 7, with a shell shock pinning weapon like a rotor cannon, you're only on a 6 anyway. So even in that situation where you've lost your sergeant and you've got your leadership debuffed by 1, you still need a 6. You rarely have to be under the effects of fear and shell shock and have lost your sergeant all at the same time for this ever to kick in. So a lot of the time, the number's just too low for it to do anything, which is a real shame. It does mean, though, the other half of this trait means you win ties in melee, which is definitely not something to be sniffed at. Although, again, a lot of the time, that won't come up because you'll, win or lose by, 1 point more than often than you will draw. And a lot of the time as well, you and your opponent will be aiming to hit units in melee with units that are going to overwhelm them as well. So a lot of the time that won't come up. So again, this is actually a pretty good part of the Legion trait, but it just doesn't come up that often, really. So 2 fairly weak halves of the Legion trait. I would say a little bit better than they are given credit for, but not brilliant. But luckily for the Word Bearers, I don't think this is their real faction trait. I think their real trait is a different one. And then we've got their advanced reaction, which is called Glorious Martyrdom. And what this does is when you get shot, you can sacrifice a model to cancel the entire shooting attack, which is very good. And this works on any unit, not just infantry. So in theory, if you add like a unit of 3 Predators and you get shot by something really big where you think you might lose multiple vehicles, technically you can sacrifice a Predator as well, which is kind of cool. But that's not going to be what you're going to use this for most of the time. You're generally going to use this when an important infantry unit that you've got gets shot by a big shooting attack. An enemy unit with Volkite Culverins buffed by an armor stoss, something like that, maybe shooting at one of your elite units. You just cancel the shot altogether. Now, when you think about what other advanced reactions do, they generally tend to be some level of cancellation, like giving out Feel No Pain, or maybe moving your unit away from being shot, or giving you an invulnerable save like the Thousand Sun ones. They're all good reactions, they're all good. This one is just the next step along. Yes, you lose one model, but the whole attack is cancelled, which is just even better. Is this the best reaction in the game? I think it's a very good contender for being the best reaction in the game, because shooting is just such a big deal, and there are so many very powerful shooting attacks. You imagine if you're playing against a Lord of War, just being able to turn off its guns effectively for 1 turn if it shoots one of your units of infantry. If you're fighting something that's going to try to delete units of infantry every turn, you just turn it off. It's just not happening. Big unit of 20 Space Marines gets hit by plasma cannons or some phosphex or something like that. Just turn off the attack, 1 guy dies. Very, very powerful. Very good thing to have access to. And onto the Warlord traits. So they've got 3 like everybody else. So Enslaved by Darkness is traitor only. Now this gives you +1 strength and toughness for the first 3 turns of the game. Then no bonus for turn 4 and 5. And -1 strength and toughness on turn 6. Now, this is good mostly for the +1 toughness, so the strength is nice and will have an effect, but mostly +1 toughness makes you much harder to instant death as a character, and in character versus character fights, instant death is normally the decider for most characters. This is quite good because in the first 3 turns of the game, that's when a lot of the game really happens, so the fact that it goes off or goes weaker later on, oftentimes you kind of already decided the game by that point. The downsides with this are it's only affecting your warlords, and most great warlord traits are things that are buffing units and that kind of stuff. It's also a movement phase reaction, which I generally consider fairly weak as well. There's also Unswerving Devotion. Now this one is really good, so this makes you auto-pass your first morale or pinning roll within 6 inches of this warlord every turn, so it can affect multiple units. And even if this is only on maybe 2 or 3 key units, maybe fighting on an objective, or some shooter units hanging near the back of the battlefield, this is huge. Like making multiple units ignore pinning tests for the first time on each turn, or, you know, morale tests if they happen as well, is really, really, really good. And it comes with a shooting phase reaction, my favourite kind of reaction as well, and I think this is the best warlord trait, generally. And finally, we've got Iconoclast. So this is, you know, the word bearers wanting to tear down everybody else's tributes to their gods, what they worship, etc., which is super cool. It's also a very powerful buff, so it's +1 attack to the warlord and the whole unit if he's fighting against a unit with an independent character in, which is when you really need the buffs generally, or with a Vexillor or a standard. So not going to be active all the time for sure, but it will be active quite a lot of the time. And in quite a lot of the combats where it matters as well. A lot of the combats that matter, your enemy unit's going to have an independent character in it, and every unit that wants to go into combat that can take one really will be taking a Vexillor as well. So this will be on a lot of the time, and like I say, +1 attack is one of the most powerful type of buffs you can get because it's so hard to come by. So if you've got a really good combat unit, that will be a great buff. It's also an assault phase reaction, which is generally good as well if it's being put on a combat unit like this probably will. So that's also a great option and very thematic as well. Alright, so onto the Armoury. This is where the really good stuff is. So, first of all, there's a trait called Corrupted. Now this is a game-wide rule, and we can expect to see this on other things probably in the future as more books come out as well. Word bearers have got access to it for now. So when a unit is corrupted, it gets Fear 1, which in itself is a very powerful rule. The unit also becomes immune to enemy fear, which is a nice thing to have. Not going to come up all the time, but a nice thing to have. But most importantly, auto passes morale checks. Now, whenever they take a morale check, they take D3 wounds on the unit instead. Now, that is a really good trade-off. If you imagine maybe a unit of 20 tactical marines who have got the corrupted trait, you've basically just got to kill all of them to get rid of them, whereas normally you would be looking to sweep those marines, beat them in combat, push them back. It means you can't get them off objectives until you've killed them all. It's a really good ability. Really, really good. The drawback to Corrupted is Psychic Focus weapons have instant death against corrupted units, which again, on some units it doesn't matter, but some corrupted units that is quite a drawback. There's not that many Psychic Focus weapons out there generally, though. You may come across the odd player who really loves Psychers and has lots of them, and then you're probably going to have a bad day, but it's not going to be that common. Also to note as well, characters and units need to both be corrupted for them to be able to join, so your corrupted independent characters can only join corrupted units. So how do we get access to Corrupted? Well, the first way of doing it is Dark Channeling. So Dark Channeling is an upgrade that you buy for your infantry and dreadnought units. It costs 25 points, and it just gives them Corrupted. So 25 points to give a dreadnought Fear 1 is in itself quite a powerful thing, because if it's a melee dreadnought, you know, it can't be moved, which is really good. Also on a big unit of tactical marines, as I've said, or also on combat units as well in general. Just being able to give them Fear 1, giving them that auto pass morale is quite a big deal. So the other way to get access to Corrupted is with the Burning Law upgrade for Praetors, or the Diabolist Consul upgrade for Centurions as well. They both do exactly the same thing. They're both 25 points. What these give you is Corrupted as well as a Psychic Discipline as well, which is a bargain at 25 points for a Praetor, certainly. And if you're going to take Centurions as well and put them in your units, this is basically giving you a Psyker for 25 points as well, which is a bit cheaper than your average librarian, and also does give you the force weapon too. The powers in this give you +1 strength and toughness on the charge if you pass a psychic test, and it lasts until the end of the assault phase. What's really cool is if you fail the psychic test, you actually still get the buff, and it lasts until your next turn. So failing it actually improves the buff, rather than getting no buff, which is pretty cool. And much like the Warlord trait we just talked about, +1 strength and toughness is great, because that +1 toughness will make it harder to instant death your character, and it's especially good on, melee praetors and that kind of thing who want to beat the opposing characters in duels. It also comes with a pretty good template weapon, which is Strength 7, AP 4, Deflagrate as well, which is, a nice thing to have access to. It rends on a 6 as well, so dropping that template weapon on an enemy unit is also going to be pretty good. And really, for the package, getting the corrupted, getting that fear, being able to join a corrupted unit, getting access to those psychic powers as well, is just a really good 25 points upgrade that you should be certainly putting on your praetors, and is definitely worth considering as a Centurion option as well. Next, we've got the Tainted weapons. So there's a couple of these that I'll wait until I review the units to talk about, but for now we're talking about the power weapon upgrades. So Tainted Blade, Tainted Axe, and Tainted Maul. These only go on characters, and they're quite expensive at 10 points really. They give you Murderous Strike 6, but for 10 points that's actually a pretty expensive upgrade, considering you could just buy a Thunderhammer or a Power Fist, which will often instant death things anyway, and also give you the strength bonus. Now, yes, you could put it on one of these and you've got to strike at initiative and maybe get that instant death, but generally I think it's too expensive when you could buy one of the other alternatives. If you are going to buy this, the sword is probably the ideal option, because if you're going to be fishing for 6s and hoping for 6s to murder or strike things, the sword also rends on a 6 as well. So most of the things that you will be hitting that are hard, like a Dreadnought, you're going to need a 6 to wound them anyway. Even with the other weapons, like a Power Axe, you would probably need a 6 to wound them, so you might as well have a 6 that also rends, that also murder strikes, and strikes at initiative at the same time. That would be the best use for this, I think, would be taking the sword version. The other two versions of it, the Power Maul, if you take that, you're generally looking to kill Power Armoured Marines, not characters, in which case instant death is not something that you're looking for. And if you're going to take the Axe, that has definitely got a bit of a use case if you put it on the Axe, but again, you're throwing so few attacks that you would be taking that to try and kill Terminators or other characters, at which point you might as well just have a Thunderhammer or Power Fist instead. So these upgrades, not that great, and I think in reality these could have been free. Probably, a lot of Legions get these minor upgrade things for free. These probably could have been free, or even 5 points to make them a bit better. Then we've got the Warpfire Weapons. I really love these. These are really good. So they are -1 strength compared to plasma weapons. You buy these as a 5-point upgrade over your normal plasma weapons. -1 strength. Not that big a deal, because you will still wound most things on a 2 with a 6 strength weapon. Obviously it changes if you want to shoot things like Dreadnoughts, or maybe you want to shoot things like Automata in future, or you want to shoot light vehicles. The -1 strength does come into play, but I think it's a small price to pay for what you get. So firstly, it doesn't have Get Hot, which is obviously a big deal, because plasma, even basic plasma, is expensive, and Marines blowing themselves up sometimes is not ideal. The Blaster, which is the plasma gun equivalent Warpfire weapon, is Assault range 24, rather than Rapid Fire range 24, so not only can you shoot it and then fire it, but also you're getting 2 shots at a 24-inch range, and one of the biggest problems with plasma guns is, A, they generally tend to come when you take them en masse in a tactical support squad, which is quite easy to kill, and you want to get them so close to the enemy they're just going to die an awful lot, whereas the Blaster solves that problem and gets rid of Get Hot. For 5 points, it is pricey putting a 15-point plasma gun on a Space Marine, but it does make them a lot better, and they really can at that point sit back and shoot, rather than having to go closer to the enemy, so this is a really good upgrade. And then on top of that as well, they also get pinning, which is just great. I really love pinning. You listen to any of my content, I think it's one of the most powerful things in the game, and I think it's really fun to play as well. And this combos really well with the fact there's a lot of fear in the army from the corruption, so we've got, access to lots of fear. Most enemy units should be getting covered by fear, and you've got easy access to pinning weapons as well from this plasma. Pinning weapons that are going to wound and first force that pinning check as well. this is really good. And for this reason, I also like the plasma cannon versions of these as well. Again, they're expensive, but they sit a little bit further away from the battle. They can blow up a lot of things. You just take 5 of them. You don't have to take lots of things. You just need enough to force the pin and test and do some damage and pin the enemy. So the drawbacks to these are, yes, they can be pricey if you're taking them on lots of models, but I definitely would tend towards a unit of 10 Warpfire blasters. With this would be a really good unit, and even if they are not the most efficient, they're very thematic and they will be good on the table, especially if you can stop your opponent blowing them off the table too early. What does work really well with these, though, is taking them on single models, because you obviously only need to cause 1 wound to trigger a pin and test, and plasma does wound quite consistently. So if you've got 2 plasma shots, or even 1 plasma shot on maybe a BS5 guy like a plasma pistol, it's pretty easy to get a wound through and force a pin and test. And if you can spread lots of these throughout your army and have lots of them in, lots of different units that have all got, a plasma pistol or a plasma gun here and there, depending on what you've gone for, you can force a lot of pin and tests on your opponent, which is really good. So I would definitely try Warpfire pistols on independent characters where you can take them. If you are playing units that can take, the odd special weapon, or even if you just got the option to take 1 special weapon, you can do it, just take 1 of those plasma blasters. And for things like vehicles or dreadnoughts, where you've got the option for maybe a couple of plasma cannons or 1 plasma cannon, you can just take 1, and when they fire that, it's going to force a pin and test. You can just force a lot of pin and tests with these weapons, which is why I think they're really great. And then last but not least, we've got Boltspitters. Boltspitters are propelled by a mechanism that Tech Priest can't identify, but it does seem suspiciously like a bolter or a Gravis Heavy Bolter. The best thing about these is you can make other people jealous, because you've got weapons with identical stats to bolters and Gravis Heavy Bolters in your army, but they've got their own unique name, which nobody else gets access to, which is really fantastic. And aren't you glad that you chose Word Bearers to get access to something as potentially powerful as this? So to sum up, Word Bearers definitely got the worst Legion trait, but I think that's given people a poor opinion of them in general, and I think it's a mistake to stop at the Legion trait and say, oh, Word Bearers aren't very good. They've got arguably the best advanced reaction in the game, a very good case for it being the best advanced reaction in the game. Corrupted is brilliant, and in my opinion is the Word Bearer's real Legion trait. It's giving you fear, it's giving you morale immunity, 2 things that are both really, really good. And access to that Warpfire plasma is really, really good as well. You've got an army basically of fear all over the place, loads of pinning, loads of fantastic things that you can do just with that, even though they've got a few duds in their armory. For example, like the Tainted weapons, which aren't that good. I think the overall package of what they've gotten out of this section of the rules is actually very good, and I'm really excited to see what some people can do with Word Bearers being powerful and effective on the table, as well as thematically having access to all that corruption and that fear. So that's the end of the show. Hope you've enjoyed the content. Do look out for part 2 coming in the near future of this Word Bearers review. If you enjoyed the video, please do leave me a like and a subscribe, and do leave me some comments down below if there's anything you'd like to talk about or any feedback you've got from this episode. Thank you very much for listening. I'll speak to you soon, and bye-bye.